In this video, we'll take a look at the input statement. The input statement allows the user to enter information into the form and have that information captured in a program record. Then the program record can be used to insert or update those values into database columns. Let's take a look at how the input statement works. The input statement allows you to program a block of code that allows the user to use the form to enter new records. You can also manage the user as they're working within the input by, for example, forcing them to enter some information. Here, when I leave the store name field, I'm unable to leave the field because I must enter a company name. Once I've done that, I can move through the fields. Another control block being used in the input statement here is if the user enters Chicago, the state field is automatically populated with the Illinois abbreviation. And we'll add our phone information and choose OK. Now that we have the record added to the database, we can query for that record. And we can also update the record. Now here the update is also using an input block of code. But instead of working with a new cleared form, we are instead leaving the record in place for the user to update it. Let's take a look at the code and see how the input statement works. The first thing we'll look at is the main block. So in this program, we go ahead and open a new window with the form that displays the form that we want to work with. Then we have a menu that is set up with all of the actions. And one of the actions that is available is to add a new record. When the add action is triggered, we're calling a function called updateCust and passing a flag to it. Now this flag is just going to provide information that the user is wanting to add a new row, not update an existing row. So if we look at the input updateCust function, we're going to find that in a different module, and we can come over here and take a look at it. The input updateCust function again receives the flag. So as we first are looking at this through the perspective of adding a new row, the flag is set to A. We're initializing our work record to null. Now we have two records that we're working with in order to reuse a function that can be used for both an adding of a new record and a updating of an existing record. And if we take a look at the definition of the work cust_rec, we'll see that it is defined and is exactly the same as what we're calling the master record. So again, it's just a set of program variables that are identical to the columns in the database, and these are again also matching or mapping to the form that we're working with. So what we want to do is back in our function, the input update function, we are initializing the work record to null. In other words, we're going to have one record that has no values in it to start, and we're going to follow through the logic of adding a new customer, and we're going to set the master record equal to the work record. So again, on a new record, we want the master record to be null. The work record was initialized to null, so we're ready to begin and go into our input. We also have a variable set here called highCust that's simply calling a function which is going out and identifying the max store num. So what is the last or highest store num value that was entered? And we're going to use that in our input statement as well. All right, so back to our function. We come down here to the actual input block. And again, at this point now we've cleared the form because our master record that's used with the input has been initialized to null. So input by name, master record, meaning we want to input by all of the columns that are available. All the fields on the form are open to receive input. Then we're here working with some control blocks, again, to help the user navigate and to provide some logic in the use of adding a new record. So before input, we're going to actually set the store num to be the next store num in line, and that's where we're simply getting our next store num record, and we don't want the user to add a new piece of data into the store num. So we're going to go ahead and set that value as well as set the field to be false, so the user cannot enter into that field. But after field store name, we want to force them back into the store name by using next field. So the way that the control blocks work in the input is after field store name. So after the user's cursor has left the field that is named, go ahead and execute this code. So when they've left the store name, if it is null, if the store name value in the record is null. Now remember, the program record is capturing the information that the user is adding. Then next field is store name. Okay, so as long as they have not put anything in there, let's keep them in the store name field until they do. Then the other piece of logic that we looked at, after field city. So when the user leaves the city field, check and see what is in the record. And if it matches Chicago, then go ahead and set the state variable in the customer record to Illinois. Now once the user has accepted the input, the next thing that happens as part of the add action is to call a function called insert cust. And insert cust is the function that actually does the SQL insert statement to add the row to the database. So we see here the insert where the values are those that are currently in the master record. Now the last thing to note is that when we call the input update cust function, we can read this as, if this call to this function returns true, then let's go ahead and insert the data into the database. So if it returns true, we're going to call insert cust function. Now when we call the input update cust function, one of the things we're checking for is if the user has accepted the dialog, in other words, they've pressed the OK button, or if they've canceled the dialog. And that information is what we get from the int flag built-in variable, and we can return that information back. So if the user had canceled out of the input statement, this would return false, and then we would continue that path instead of returning true, meaning that they are ready to insert that data into the database.